There we go.
Welcome to the house. You heard Ethan say it. There we go. We're back. It's been a couple years, but we're so excited to be back talking all things NFL. Very special interview coming up with Garrett Podell, too, of CBS Sports. We'll get to that in just a minute. But Ethan, we needed to know, how's the Mad Max?
Mad Max is sitting well at the moment. Give me a couple, probably 2 to 3 hours, and then we'll find out really how that Mad Max is sitting. But great to be back. Great to be back on To the House. It's been what 2-3 years now since we last recorded To the House. So it's great talking some football, not just Pittsburgh Steelers football, but across the entire nation, the NFL,
across the nation,
across the nation
is watching. Do you remember that old WWE intro where it ended with Jim Ross going, "The world is watching"? That's To the House.
Nope.
That's before your time. That's
before
2008.
my time. I was
you were
just
like 3 years old in 2008.
Exactly. Yeah,
just kidding. You weren't that young, but
not
you might
that
as well
young,
have been.
but yeah,
might as well have been. Anyway, we're going to now jump to our interview with CBS Sports' Garrett Podell, and when we get back, we are going to pick our games of the week and pick 4 against the spread in some of those games. You got 5 games we're going to slightly break down for you, and we're going to see who the year-long winner is. Loser has to eat hot wings in the presence of the winner to make sure it's all legit, no funny business going on here. And boy, I hope it's not me, the loser, that is. I do hope I win, believe that or not. But anyway, here's Garrett Podell. Garrett Podell of CBS Sports. Garrett, thank you very much for joining me to break down what should be a hell of an NFL season.
Thank you so much for having me, Nick. Excited to be here. And yeah, week 1's only a few days away, and it's like returning to school from summer break. You enjoy the downtime, you enjoy the off season, but you're ready to be back with your friends and back on the grind and ready for all the action that comes with it.
Exactly. The minute that calendar flipped to August and the fantasy football group chat started talking, I went from being like, oh, that's still off in the distance to, oh boy, it's time to go full throttle. But obviously an exciting time of the year. And I think the college games this past weekend served as a real good appetizer for some NFL action. And we'll start right at the top with one of the biggest questions of the season. Can the Chiefs three-peat? People thought last year was going to be their down year, and they won the whole Super Bowl. Call it the power of Swifty mania. Call it just a very talented team and coaching staff. But Garrett, what do you think the odds of this team three-peating are?
I mean, you have Patrick Mahomes, so you start there. I think it's worth noting that in the Super Bowl era, there's never been a three-peat. So the odds historically not in their favor in the sort of pre-Super Bowl era. I mean, the Packers did three-peat. They won the first 2 Super Bowls and the 1965 NFL championship. So that's really the three-peat in football history. I mean, if the marketing for Super Bowl came out a year earlier, I wouldn't be saying that there's never been a full three-peat in the Super Bowl era. But I think they're certainly poised to be able to make a run at least back to the AFC championship game, because when you look around, they still have Mahomes, Travis Kelce. Defensively, Steve Spagnuolo is an incredible coordinator, and Trent McDuffie, fresh off his first All-Pro team in only his second season, you would think he's going to perform maybe even better than he did a year ago, just getting additional experience. Chris Jones is back. So they have a lot of big pieces that could lead them back. I personally don't see it happening. I look toward the uncertainty in the wide receiver room. Now, they did have issues last year. Their receiver room led the NFL wide receiver position drops and drop percentage. But I just don't know with, what they're going to expect early from Xavier Worthy. And then Marquise Brown isn't starting the year healthy. Rashee Rice doesn't seem like he's getting suspended now because his court cases have been pushed back kind of more toward the winter. So that hammer could drop either probably later in the season or maybe even in 2025. So I just think there's a lot of uncertainty there. And I don't know what they're going to get out of their left tackle position, which is a rookie out of BYU. And then at the right tackle spot, you have Juwan Taylor, who was the most penalized player in football last year. So I'm not really sure how that's all going to look, especially with the inexperience at left tackle.
Absolutely. And so one of their main challengers throughout the past couple of years have been the Buffalo Bills. Now, people kind of think their window may be closing due to the losses in the secondary, due to the receiving core losses. But what do you think the ceiling for the Bills are? And who do you see challenging the Chiefs for that top spot, if not the Bills?
I think the Bills are still going to be really good, right? I mean, we start with Josh Allen, his 173 combined passing and rushing touchdowns are the most ever in a 4-year stretch in NFL history. He broke that record that was previously held by Drew Brees in the 2011 through 2014 season. So Josh Allen is prolific no matter who's out there. A lot of people point to the loss of wide receiver Stephon Diggs, but he kind of was unofficially phased out of the offense, I guess you could say, as the second half of the season wore on and Joe Brady became the full-time offensive coordinator. So I think his loss in Buffalo, I think they might feel it a little bit in the downfield threat department, but they kind of went away from him a little bit, it felt like, near the back half of that season, really funneling in a lot of targets toward Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, and Khalil Shakir flashed a little bit toward the end of last season. So I still think Buffalo's going to be really, really good. And to address the second half of your question, I think the Baltimore Ravens are their biggest threat in the AFC. I mean, they made the AFC title game and narrowly lost to 17-10, I believe the final score was last year. And I think this year their defense might not be as good because you lose Mike McDonald, who is now the Seattle Seahawks head coach after being their DC for the number one defense in football. Patrick Queen, a Pro Bowler, is now on the Steelers. Geno Stone, who's number 2 in the league in interceptions, a safety, he's now on the Bengals. But I think offensively, they're going to be way better for a few reasons. One, year 2 under offensive coordinator Todd Monken, who actually has them lining up in 3 wide receiver sets, 4 wide receiver sets, more modern passing style formations than they ever did before in Baltimore. So that's year 2 there, year 2 of Lamar and everybody getting on the same page with his scheme and what they're working with. And 2, the addition of Derrick Henry. I get it. You know, he's a little bit older. He was number 2 in the league in rushing yards last year, but he had to have the most carries in the league to hit that number. His efficiency, yards per carry, was the lowest of his career, around, I think, 4.2. But it was still pretty good. I think he was like 18th out of 44 qualified running backs. And I think the big thing for his addition is just what it does for Lamar Jackson, taking a load off his plate, because Lamar is the only quarterback ever with 5 seasons of 750 or more rushing yards. And all of that is his first 5 seasons as the Ravens starting quarterback, in which he's also doubled as the team's leading rusher. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people point to, well, geez, Lamar, he kind of breaks down in the playoffs, or the numbers aren't as good. Well, it's understandable if you're asking him to, you know, call the plays on the field, look at the audibles, and do everything at line of scrimmage, throw the ball and run the ball. So the fact you have Derrick Henry in there to really take that load off of Lamar's plate, I think that could really boost Jackson's performance, particularly down the stretch and into the postseason.
Yeah, it's definitely something I'm excited to watch too. I know it's probably a sin for me to say I'm a big Lamar Jackson fan as a Steelers fan, but he's done very well for me in the fantasy department, and I know that's probably a skewed way of thinking to prioritize a division rival's star quarterback because he's a good fantasy player for you. But I love Lamar Jackson, love Derrick Henry, and really interested to see what they can do as a cohesive unit. We've talked about a couple teams that might challenge the Chiefs, but as a whole in the league, what team do you think kind of intrigues you the most as we head into this new season?
I think for me, it's the Green Bay Packers, because with the second half of the season and the postseason, I think we saw a glimpse of what they could be when they're firing on all cylinders. Jordan Love, it was his first year as the starter, replacing Aaron Rodgers last season. And it was an uneven start. I think he threw like 14 touchdowns to 10 picks in his first 6, 7, 8 games. But then the light bulb came on back half of the season, weeks 11 through 18 touchdown passes to just 1 interception, which was the best touchdown interception ratio in the league in that stretch, which powered the Packers into the postseason, where he then set team playoff records for single game pass rating, single game yards per pass against the Dallas Cowboys, a game that I was at and covering for CBS Sports. And he just looked masterful that day. I mean, I remember their first couple plays against Dallas went backwards on a couple runs, Aaron Jones. And then all of a sudden he's hitting a hole shot over the middle, just over the linebacker in front of the safety to Romeo Doubs for a long completion that moved the chains on 3rd and long. And they were off and running. So I think Jordan Love, a full year as the starter under his belt, they also set the record as a team for the most catches, yards, and receiving touchdowns by first and second year players. So not only was Love green, but the whole nucleus around him really was. So I think just that whole group of Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, all having another year together, I think their ceiling or potential is unbelievable. And I'm excited to see what that looks like. Head coach Matt LaFleur, he now knows he can open up the full playbook with LaFleur, with Love the whole season. And then they added Josh Jacobs, who was the 2022 rushing champ, and he's only 26. And yes, he took a step back a little bit in 23, but he was holding out for a contract dispute this offseason, signs the 4-year, $48 million deal, and full participant in the offseason program. I think he'll look a lot more like 2022 than 2023 and 2024. So to me, it's the Packers because offensively they did all those things. They added Xavier McKinney, who was Pro Football Focus, highest grade cover safety, and a new DC in Jeff Hafley, who vows to be a lot more aggressive in terms of his pressure usage and man coverage uses, a few things that many Packers fans despised his predecessor, Joe Barry, for not using and just dropping back into passive zone looks for a lot of the snaps. So I'd say the Green Bay Packers, I think they could really surprise and go really deep this season.
Yeah, love that answer. We're going to keep it right in the division. I know you followed the Cowboys very closely. That's a team that there's been a lot of noise this offseason for. They have one of the games I'm really excited to watch this upcoming first week against the Browns. What storylines are you watching heading into week 1 of that game?
My gosh, I mean, there's so
Where
many.
to start, I guess.
So many. I think for me, you have to start up front in the trenches because Dallas lost 8-time Pro Bowl left tackle Tyron Smith to New York Jets in free agency, and Pro Bowl center Tyler Biadasz to the Washington Commanders in free agency. And both of those key spots on the offensive line, center and left tackle, are being filled by rookies in first-round pick Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma, who is Smith's replacement as Dak Prescott's blindside protector. And then you have third-round pick Cooper Beebe out of Kansas State, who's the back-to-back Big 12 Offensive Lineman of the Year, playing at center, a position he never played in college. But, I spoke with Mike McCarthy on Monday and Cooper Beebe himself on Monday as well, talking about it. And McCarthy loves the strides he's made at the position. And Beebe himself just said he felt like his confidence hit another level once training camp began out in Oxnard, California. And obviously the team likes him enough to make him their week 1 starter against a Cleveland Browns team that was the number 1 total defense in football last year and has 2023 NFL Defensive Player of the Year, Myles Garrett, somebody who Guyton's probably going to see a lot of out at left tackle. And maybe if they have him stunt inside, Beebe's going to see Garrett a little bit also. So I think definitely starting there is critical. And then outside, of course, you have a little revenge drama with Amari Cooper versus the Cowboys. They traded him away for almost nothing, 5th and 6th round picks and a salary dump a few years back. And so now he's playing Dallas. And on the flip side, you have Trayvon Diggs coming back off a torn ACL that he suffered in practice during week 3 a year ago. And Deron Bland, who was an all-pro and led the league in interceptions, is out for the first 6 to 8 weeks with a stress fracture in his foot that's since been operated on. So rookie 5th-round pick Kalen Carson is going to step in as the other starting outside corner opposite Trayvon Diggs. And so it'll be really fascinating to see how Diggs, fresh off an injury, now he's had almost a whole year, probably like 10 months to rehab and get right, and a rookie 5th-round pick going up against Amari Cooper. So I think to me, those are very fascinating storylines to watch.
Absolutely. I'm struggling to find a game that I'm more excited for. Obviously, my bias Steelers pick. There's a lot of new faces on the Falcons in terms of coaching and players, a bunch on the Steelers too, but I love that
Smith
Browns game.
Switch sidelines. If
exactly.
Smith, it's an automatic, immediate revenge game.
Exactly. And who doesn't love Arthur Smith, even though he shaved the mustache? So, I mean, that's obviously a huge game. But this Browns game, not only because they're a division foe for my Steelers, but I mean, you got to love the Cowboys storyline too. They're America's team for a reason. People like to see what they're doing. And so that's going to be one I think we should all keep our eyes on this week. Speaking of keeping an eye on, you mentioned some of those young guys protecting Dak. Who else in this league? It can be a rookie, it could be a guy entering his sophomore season, just someone who maybe we haven't seen the full potential realized yet. Who do you think is due for the biggest breakout season this year?
That's a really good question. I'm gonna give you two. I'm gonna give you two running backs. I'll
Okay.
give you Bijan Robinson and Brees Hall, two running backs who the potential is oozing out of them, and they've fully been embraced. You mentioned fantasy football; they've been embraced, going really high in fantasy drafts, and I think both of them could break out for massive years for different reasons. Brees Hall, his offensive line is light years better than it was a year ago after the Jets. I mentioned Tyron Smith; they brought in Tyron Smith. They brought in Morgan Moses and John Simpson from the Baltimore Ravens. And so they really upgraded a lot of that offensive line, also drafted Olu Fashanu out of Penn State with their first-round pick. So they poured a ton of resources this offseason into the O-line. Oh, and by the way, Aaron Rodgers is healthy. I mean, at least we hope he lasts more than 4 snaps this year. But if he does play the whole year, you'd imagine Brees Hall and the kind of looks he's going to get down low in the box near the line of scrimmage would look a lot different with Aaron Rodgers under center than Zach Wilson and the other rotating cast of quarterbacks they used last year. So I think better offensive line, better quarterback situation for Brees could create a big year. And then for Bijan Robinson, he's had a good offensive line in Atlanta. He's got a lot of former first-round picks up there, and Chris Lindstrom's one of the best offensive guards in football. But I think the coaching change and the quarterback change are going to be massive for Robinson. You look at Zach Robinson, the new offensive coordinator who was an assistant in a few different positions on Sean McVay's LA Rams staff for the last 5 years. He is coming from a staff that gets the ball to their star players, whether it was Todd Gurley, and yes, Robinson was around for the twilight years of the Todd Gurley run in LA, Cooper Kupp, who won 2021 Offensive Player of the Year and Super Bowl MVP, and even Puka Nacua last year, who rewrote the NFL rookie receiving records this past season. They get the ball to their star players, which was a critique of Arthur Smith's when he was the head coach in Atlanta. And so I think Zach Robinson's addition and Kirk Cousins' arrival, if he stays upright, kind of similar to the Rodgers thing, having a quarterback defense's respect, that could also lead to a big year for Bijan down in Atlanta.
Absolutely. And I got to ask the question, is this the year we finally see something out of Kyle Pitts?
I mean, you would think so, right? I mean, you have Kirk Cousins. You got a real deal quarterback in Atlanta, probably for the first time in Pitt's career because he missed out on Matt Ryan. And, they have all these weapons. They've got Bijan. They signed Darnell Mooney to be a number 3 receiver. They've got Drake London and an offense that, going back to the Zach Robinson thing, gets their marquee players the ball. And coming out of Florida, a lot of people thought Kyle Pitts was just a freak athlete at size, speed, strength for the tight end position. So I would hope and think Zach Robinson would look to get him the ball.
Absolutely. And, we've talked about the breakout players who maybe that's in a new location isn't going to exactly thrive with their new team. Do you have anybody in mind who might struggle this year and maybe it's not being talked about too much?
That's a good question. People who could struggle. I think, so many times you're asked about, what's going to go right, what's going to go well. I guess Gardner Minshew is an easy one, right? He was named the Raiders starting quarterback. He was on the Colts a year ago, and he came in for Anthony Richardson, and they were, a few yards away from winning the AFC South and making the postseason in Week 18 against the Houston Texans. But I think Gardner Minshew, just maybe more because of his surroundings than anything else, could struggle. Yes, Devontae Adams is there, and he's one of the best wide receivers in football, has been for a long time. And they have Brock Bowers, rookie out of Georgia, who was the best college tight end the last 3 years. If you just look at the numbers and watch some tape, Michael Mayer, who was a second-round pick in the 2023 draft is a nice weapon. Jacoby Myers is decent, but I just don't know that he's going to maximize what he's got there. In Las Vegas, you have Zamir White, who was Josh Jacobs' understudy for a while, and now he's getting his shot. I just don't see Gardner Minshew elevating this offense. So in their last preseason game he played with Las Vegas against the Cowboys, Dallas was playing all their backups defensively.
Mm-hmm.
And the Raiders played their starters because they were trying to figure out between him and Aiden O'Connell who was going to be the starter. Well, to me, I thought Aiden O'Connell outplayed Gardner Minshew both in that game and in the preseason. And I was personally surprised that O'Connell was not named the starter by head coach Antonio Pierce. Pierce cited, the veteran experience that Minshew has and his mobility. But to me, I would have gone with Aiden O'Connell as the starter. And I, just because he's a young guy, let's see what he has. I think Minshew is a veteran journeyman. It's kind of established. He can be a nice fill-in, but he's not really a long-term solution. So I'd probably say, I guess, Minshew out in Las Vegas.
I like that because I feel like the easy cop-out answer is just going with the running back in a new place because we've seen so many examples of them maybe not panning out. And you got Joe Mixon, you got Josh Jacobs, you got Saquon Barkley. So I appreciate the Gardner Minshew answer because we've seen so many examples of these running backs changing things up for greener pastures and not going well. So you have to wonder if that's going to happen this year and who it would be.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I do think this class might be unique in that almost all of them are upgrading their situations. Like Saquon Barkley going from playing behind a roughshod Giants offensive line and being in the backfield with Daniel Jones, who a lot of Giants fans are calling for his head, and the season hasn't even started, to an Eagles offensive ecosystem that has some awesome receivers and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, a quarterback in Jalen Hurts, who just 2 years ago was the 2022 All-Pro quarterback. So I think that's a massive upgrade. I think Derrick Henry, another massive upgrade as well, because Will Levis as a rookie, lowest completion percentage in football and a really young and experienced offensive line that struggled in Tennessee. And then for Josh Jacobs, the Raiders struggled last season, and now he's going over to the Packers, who just a few minutes ago I was waxing poetic about could be one of the best offenses perhaps in football. So I think this could be one of the rare off seasons, Nick, where all those three big name running backs we talked about, they could all be in a better spot and honestly maybe even play better. So that's why I went Minshew. Is I thought about those running backs, but to me, those are all upgrades.
Yes, very fair. I love what they're building in Houston too. I think that's going to be a really fun team to watch if Stroud has no kind of sophomore slump. But anyway, we'll move on now to the coaching side of things. We saw the Urban Meyer experiment when he returned to the NFL with the Jags. Is Harbaugh going to have that same luck? It'd be really hard for him to replicate it to that extreme. But anyway, any new coaches, perhaps second-year coaches with a thin leash, do you think there are any obvious answers to a coach who might not make it through this season?
I think Saints head coach Dennis Allen is one. He's somebody who general manager Mickey Loomis defended not firing this past offseason. So, when you have to answer questions about why didn't you fire somebody, that it's obviously not going really well after missing the postseason again in New Orleans with a different quarterback and Derek Carr. So I think he's going to be on there. I don't know how hot Brian Dable's seat is with the New York Giants, but just watching the offseason Hard Knocks and seeing the behind the scenes stuff, it seems like owner John Mara is wanting to see some growth and step in the right direction. And I think he's going to be disappointed this season just because they obviously tried to trade up for Drake May or Jaden Daniels. I mean, the off-season Hard Knocks show showed that. They were calling the New England Patriots multiple times, whether it was at the Combine or on draft day, to trade up. So the front office, Joe Shane, they know they need a different quarterback. I still have no idea why they signed him to that 4-year, $160 million deal 2 years ago. The good news for them is they can cut him in it next offseason and save about $20 million off the cap. So Brian Dable might be on the hot seat, but he's somebody who, since he won Coach of the Year just 2 years ago and had them in the second round of the playoffs, I think maybe he gets another year of grace if it's so apparent that the reason they're struggling is Daniel Jones. So outside Dennis Allen, just kind of going through the teams here, I think Harbaugh is going to be okay. I mean, they signed him to a massive contract, and I think he's going to get plenty of time and grace to build. They don't really have a whole lot at wide receiver, and some of the offensive line positions up on the interior are undergoing transition with Corey Linsley, their Pro Bowl center, retiring. So I think really Dennis Allen stands out to me among a lot of coaches. And then if we look at maybe an AFC coach who might be in trouble, I know you're a Pittsburgh guy, but I feel like if this Pittsburgh season is another inspiring one, that there might be some deep reflection going on in the Steel City.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who would be happy about that too. I'm excited to see what they do this year, but I think you're hitting the nail on the head with they might be forced kind of to make a change.
I mean, listen, he hasn't won a playoff game since 2016.
That's what my argument has been.
That was in the Obama administration. I mean, the end of it, but there's been 3 presidential administrations and they haven't won a playoff game. I know you can make an excuse or explain away each playoff loss. Oh, we lost to the dynasty New England Patriots. Well, one of those losses was to Blake Bortles and the Jags, who they had a great defense at the time. Jalen Ramsey was young, and they had a lot of great talent, Calais Campbell, but like, it's been way too long. And I think Tomlin, he's definitely got the Hall of Fame resume as a head coach with the Super Bowl ring, multiple Super Bowl appearances, that never had a losing season. But he's been resting on his laurels and resume to me for almost a decade now in Pittsburgh.
That Jaguars game took years off my life, I think. I think about that game way more than I should. I was going to pivot from this talking point about the Daniel Jones point you brought up with the contract, and now I'm just depressed about a playoff game from
I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. I was going to say, and this might be speaking way out of turn, but I remember growing up that Albert Haynesworth contract with Washington was always considered to be like one of the worst contracts of all time.
Yeah.
And it may be extreme, but I'm wondering how close Daniel Jones is to kind of becoming this decade generations version of that contract. And that may be speaking way out of line, but
no, he like the 2022 year that he had the best year of his career, that was before the contract was signed. So if we're just going off years when under the contract, he took a big step backwards in his on-field performance through the 6 or 7 games he played in 2023, and then he tore his ACL. And so now he's going into year 2 of it. And if it's another year of struggles and they have to cut him and still eat a massive dead cap hit, even though it is $20 million less than if they had him, it's still horrendous because it set their franchise back, you could argue, 2, 3, 4 years.
Yeah, and I believe that's all I had. Definitely, we're approaching that half-hour mark. Don't want to take more time, but we have time, I think, for one more maybe. Garrett, any storylines this season that I didn't bring up that you think maybe no one else has brought up enough either that's kind of grabbing your attention?
I think there's fascinating stuff going on with the Cincinnati Bengals. Jamar Chase is holding out. T. Higgins is playing on the last year of his franchise tag. Joe Burrow is entering year 5. He's tied for the biggest contract in football, and I get it. He's worth it. They went to a Super Bowl in his second season. But Joe Burrow, after 4 years, is a coin flip in terms of whether or not he's going to play complete the season or not. His rookie year, he had the ACL and knee injury. That other ligaments were also damaged, missed that second half of the season. Year 2, they're in the Super Bowl. Obviously, great year. Year 3, they're in the AFC title game and lose on a last-second field goal to the Chiefs. Almost go back to the Super Bowl. Last year, he has the hand or finger injury, and he misses the second half of last season. So literally, it's 50-50, 2-2, finishing the year and having a great playoff result, or him being injured and they miss the playoffs completely. So we have the wide receiver uncertainty. You'd imagine they get Jamar Chase done and that T. Higgins is going to be playing somewhere else in 2025. But So there's question marks there, right? And then Joe Burrow, we don't know if he's going to be healthy or not consistently. And it's a franchise that, has one of the less wealthy NFL owners in Mike Brown. I mean, none of these guys are poor, they're NFL owners, but in terms of the way that they go about financing their money, I mean, they took a corporate sponsor for their stadium and practice facility, something they hadn't done in a long time. They made headlines this week. They're selling used TVs in their stadium to make a small profit. I mean, most NFL teams, you don't ever hear about that. They just chuck the old TVs in the stadium and put new ones in because what's it to them? So I think, in this ever-growing NFL landscape where the salary cap keeps going up, so then players can demand more money, like, will the Bengals be able to keep up in a world where they don't know year to year if Joe Burrow is going to be healthy? And just how are they going to be able to hold their roster together going forward? Because you have Trey Hendrickson, who demanded a trade earlier this offseason, and they kind of said, you're under contract, we'll maybe address it later. I think the Bengals are kind of at a tipping point. It might sound dramatic, but to me, they're a fascinating watch just to see, like, can they keep this all together, or is a lot of this roster going to crumble in a few years around Joe Burrow?
I think the Hard Knocks producers are licking their chops for that entire AFC North outlook, because all of these teams have something that could potentially go absolutely off the wall and give them just a gold mine of content. But I like that you think the Bengals are going to lead that charge, because I always feel like it's Pittsburgh, and I hate to keep bringing everything back to Pittsburgh. But
I mean, if Joe Burrow's healthy, I don't think they will be, but it's just we don't know. We
Right.
don't know. No one, I don't care who they are, even Joe Burrow himself could tell me, I'm going to be healthy for the whole season. And I'd say, we'll see. We just don't know. I can't trust if it's 50-50.
Well, Garrett, thanks so much for taking some time to talk NFL with me, and enjoy the games, I guess, is the best thing to say there.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Nick. Enjoyed our conversation.
And thanks to Garrett for joining us for the first episode of To the House for this 2024 season. But now it's time for me and Ethan. A battle that goes back and is talked about in likes of the Battle of Gettysburg, D-Day, all of the big battles. Me versus Ethan. Who can pick these games better? Ethan, it's been a long time since we did this, but I got 5 games for us, so that should mean there's a winner from week 1 and a loser. Obviously, all wins count as wins. If we both pick the same, the result goes down as a win. So if we both picked, say, the 49ers to cover the spread, they end up covering the spread. Ethan and I both get a point for that game. There's no, it's a draw if, we both pick the same thing and it happens, or vice versa. So anyway, Ethan, my good friend, we're going to start with Ravens and Chiefs. Using the score, that's probably not the preferred method to be using the scores little sports book. But anyway, that is what we had on hand as we were preparing for this, just the quickest reference possible. Chiefs are -3. They've struggled to start the past couple years in that first game. But Ethan, do you think they cover that -3 spread here in week 1?
I do. I think the way that they've played the past couple of years on opening night, I don't think they're going to have that same result as they had in years past. Obviously, they lost against the Lions last year, and they struggled in that game. But I think this year there's been so much talk about, can this team three-peat, and I think they do have the pieces to go for that three-peat. I know they're going to be without Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who is out week 1, but I still think they have enough pieces in the pie still to be able to compete and cover that spread in week 1. I mean, a -3 spread's not that bad. Obviously, it's basically an even matchup when you look at most of the time that the bookies give the home team 3 points. But I think the Chiefs win this game over that 3-point spread, and I think they handle it pretty easily, especially with the way they played on the road last year in the AFC Championship game.
I got to go with the Ravens here. I think they can keep this within a field goal. We heard Garrett talk about it. There are some glaring issues this season with the Chiefs, even though last year was the quote unquote down year, and then this year they kind of retooled. They got Worthy, they got Brown. Some of those new pieces won't be here for the first week of the season. Uh, but I think that even with the Derrick Henry addition and whatnot of this Ravens offense, I don't think they beat them. But I do think they keep it within 3. I think this is a firefight, and I think it comes down to a late field goal, perhaps, from Harrison Butker to get the Chiefs ahead once and for all. But I think that obviously then keeps it within that 3 points. So I'm gonna say Baltimore gets this one as well. So 2 differing answers already. We've never been so back. But then we'll move on to Pittsburgh and Atlanta Steelers Falcons action. -3.5 for the Falcons, Ethan. What do you think about that one?
I really want to give this one to the Steelers, and I know not to put so much emphasis on the preseason outcome and everything like that, but I just don't see the Steelers covering this one. I think they drop this game on the road and they do not cover the spread. I mean, just seeing how this new look Arthur Smith offense is run, I still think it's going to take a couple of weeks for this offense to get fully fluid and ready to go for the season. So I just don't see them covering this game. I think there's too many glaringly obvious pieces on that offensive side of the ball that are missing right now, and there's not enough cohesion on the offensive side for them to compete and cover the spread in this game. I think defensively will keep them in this game at least by 1 possession, but 3.5, it's on the edge to where they could cover this game. It's a toss up for me, but I still think Atlanta takes this game and covers the spread.
Yeah, I'm echoing what you said. I wanted to give this to the Steelers, but think of week 1 last year against the 49ers, just disastrous. And I know there's so many different pieces this year for this team, but there's new pieces on the Atlanta side too. Zach Robinson's obviously an insane addition for that offense's OC. Kirk Cousins, they have a reliable quarterback. Bijan, Kyle Pitts, I don't see the Steelers winning this game, which is really weird and unfortunate, I guess, because the back end of their schedule is insane. Their words do not describe how difficult of an end of the season the Steelers will have. So these first couple games are paramount, but I don't think this is going to be it. I have Atlanta covering -3.5 as well here, Ethan. And then we'll move on. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
And you know what? Just because we picked against the Steelers, look what they're going to do. They're going to come out and blow the doors off Atlanta because that's what normally happens.
Reverse psychology.
Exactly. It happens all the time.
Rams versus Lions. Lions at -4. Matthew Stafford homecoming once again. I'll go first this time, Ethan. I love the Lions, but I think there's a little fire under Los Angeles, and I think that they are going to cover this one. Don't have too much on it. Just got to go with my gut sometimes. I could break it down, but that would be a disservice because I just feel it in here right now. I'm feeling it in here that the Rams are going to do some things against the Lions here. That sounded really dirty, and it wasn't meant to, but I think they cover.
I'm going to go the opposite. In the same way, I'm just feeling it. I think the Lions at home, week 1 in the good old Ford Field tundra in the dome. I just think Detroit, after the year that they had and the momentum that they have coming into the season, I think Dan Campbell's going to have his boys ready to roll. And I think they cover this spread at -4, just because the game's at home. It's home field advantage week 1 of the season. It's Sunday night football as well. It's prime time football. It's going to be an exciting game, but I think Detroit wins this one and covers the spread.
Fair enough, Ethan. 49ers and Jets. Does the Aaron Rodgers 2024 season maybe last a full quarter or a full possession this time? That is to be determined. Whether that is the case or not, I have the 49ers absolutely covering the spread against this Jets team solely for the fact that I know there has been practice and all that jazz going on, and it's not like Aaron Rodgers is just, getting dropped in there on, I believe that's is that the Monday night game?
It is the Monday night game.
I don't think he's just getting dropped in there Monday night after, being in a deserted island or a, desert sanctuary, although he might like both of those things. There's some rapport built between this team, but I think the Jets still have to mesh, especially in a game-like situation. And the 49ers speak for themselves, made it to the Super Bowl last year, have some of the most talented skill position players in the entire league. So yeah, I got the 49ers covering this one. I hesitate to say easily, especially week 1, because you never know, but I got 49ers covering this.
Yeah, the guys that they just have back. I mean, they get Ayuk back. They sign him to an extension. They got Trent Williams that is likely going to end his holdout in the next day or so when we're recording this. So I think with these guys have returning, I think it's just going to be too much for the Jets to handle. Obviously, Rodgers coming back, he's healthy, but what's it going to take for him to fully come together with this Jets offense? Obviously, we know what the defense has and the way that the way that the big play the plays that the special teams was able to make last year. But I just what the 49ers are returning on both sides of the ball, I think it's just going to be way too much to handle for this New York Jets team Monday night.
All right. 49ers cover for both of us. That takes us to our last game of our featured games to watch. Browns -2.5 versus Dem Boys, the Cowboys. A team with no controversy or, off-field shenanigans this season. The Dallas Cowboys. That's a joke in case you didn't pick up on the sarcasm there. But do I believe that it's enough to not cover 2.5? Yes, I think the Browns cover here. I think it's a very close game, but I have them covering. I'm pretty high on the Browns this year. Injuries have really plagued them, I think, especially last year, the year before. But I don't know. Something about me is really just telling me to go with the gut yet again here. I know all the games that I've gone second on, I've given these well thought out answers, but both games I decided to lead off on. I've just really been gut picks. I got the Browns. I'm excited to see what this team can do this season. Once again, they've just added pieces that I'm excited to see how it fits in there. They might bottle it because they are the Browns, but a lot of distractions there in Jerry's world. And I'm going to say that causes some week 1 mischief. And that might be really beating around the bush of anything in the nitty gritty, but I think it's enough for the Browns to walk out of there with the win and cover that spread.
Yeah, I could also see the Browns covering this game, especially with what's going on with the Dak contract and CD Lamb and holdouts and all the preseason shenanigans and whatnot. I just see the Browns with what they've added and the guys that they have, Deshaun Watson, Amari Cooper, those two guys, and the connection that they have. Obviously, I don't think Nick Chubb's going to be ready to go.
No,
For week
he's
one.
on
He's not.
unable to
Yeah, he's still
perform.
on the pup or whatever.
He's
The pup
on. Is
list.
that 4 or 6 games? 4, I think.
That 4 is the pup, so I think he did get added onto the pup. Even without him, even without Chubb, I still think the Browns cover this game just because of what they have in the cohesion that this offense has.
Wow.
I think they're. I was looking for a different adjective because I feel like I've used cohesion way too much tonight. But yeah, what they have and what this
It's
group has,
important in week 1.
it is because you want to see what you got cooking in the pot early on
Wow.
in the season. But yeah, I think as much as it pains, and I think Cleveland could fumble it in week 1. I still think they cover this spread.
It's the toughest week to pick, week 1 of a new NFL season. We'll see how we square up. Hopefully, we're not squaring up. We'll see how we we do here. And we might square up by week 2, depending on who's in the lead. Thanks so much for joining us for the return of To the House. We hope you join us for week 2. Thanks to Garrett once again for hopping in here and chatting with us. And we will see you all next week. Enjoy the games. Enjoy a Sunday of doing absolutely nothing.